At AIA Australia, helping your clients in their time of need is our number one priority. In 2016, we paid over $1.15 billion in claims to both retail and group members. That's over $4.5 million every working day. To offer your clients cover you can trust, chat to your AIA CDM today.
To drive business efficiencies and implement technology in your business, where would you start and what would you focus on?
Well, for me, it was all around CRM, to be honest. I mean, I think making sure that we've got a really good CRM system where we can track and manage partners and ensure that that's really bedded down is probably where we wanted to start. Anything to do with sort of the metrics as well, making sure that we've got really good business measurements so that we can see what's happening in the business was also really important to us. So they're probably the two areas that we really wanted to focus on. We've got given that we're a product and tech company, we wanted to make sure as well that we've got good systems around how we build products. So probably not as relevant for your viewers here, but things like Xero and Confluence, where we're actually planning what we're doing around technology and how we're building products is also focused.
Yeah, okay. So, and in terms of, I guess, the way that you visualize processes, because like advice businesses obviously have the centralized back-end process in terms of doing the research, developing the advice document. What about sort of, is this stretching from the front end? Are you mapping everything from first touch point with a client all the way through to ongoing after-sales service, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing a lot of systems mapping to work out what are the optimal process right from the get-go. In our case, we get a lot of inbound inquiries. So as they come into the funnel, how we're actually managing and nurturing our communication with prospects through to demonstrating to them, to obviously signing them up as a partner, and then there's a whole lot of work we're doing at the moment to really optimise the next steps, because there's a bit of work involved when an advisor or an accountant rolls out our technology. We want to make sure we're helping them every step of the way. So it's really about documenting down to the very nitty-gritty detail exactly what we do through that process, so that it's a great experience. So all of this comes down to how do we create the best possible experience for our partners so they get to the end of the journey and they're really successful with our technology. That to us is really, really important. So at the moment, we're probably not where we want to be, but we're certainly on that journey.
And in this process mapping, obviously like at each step of the process, there's things that need to be done. And there's a way that you'd like to see them done. Is there a certain way that you document these processes? Do you use videos or anything, or is it generally just a well-documented Word document, or how do you do that?
Well, internally, we use Confluence, which is an Atlassian product which our developers use, and that's a great system whereby if you've got internal processes or anything that doesn't change too dramatically, it's good to have those documented and really clear, and any assets or emails or other templates and things that need to fall in place off that process, it's all there. So as we get new staff in, it's great to be able to point them to that and say, look, here's the process, it's all documented, all the elements and the templates that you need to use in that process are there as well. So, when it comes to our partners though, I think, pointing them to a Confluence document, with a whole lot of process is probably not going to really cut it. You've got to create that really good experience. So we use a lot of video to really help partners understand how to roll out, for example, we've got document signing platform, how to use that, how do you sign up clients onto the platform. Having really engaging videos that really show how that works is important. And that's just, again, about creating a great experience. One of the things that we're also looking to roll out the new year in our product is in-app notifications, which will help the partners sort of the process. And that's some really great technology that a lot of software as a service providers are now building into their products. Just again, whatever you're doing, whether you're a financial advisor or a tech company like us, you've really got to step the customer or partner through a journey and really help engage them so that they feel like they've been helped through that process, and at the other end, you make them successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the way good SaaS or software as a service companies are looking at their business, I think that's the way advisors or service businesses should really be looking at them. So video, up-to-date communication through various formats throughout the advice process. With the videos, is there anything that, like, if someone hasn't got any videos, is there a particular area of the client experience that you'd suggest that they'd look at first, and maybe how to go about it?
Well, there's a lot of really good video platforms out there now that you can use, and video channels, whether it be Vimeo or whether it be YouTube. Some of the products out there like Wistia and one of the other ones we use a couple, but we've made a bit of investment in videos. So, for example, I'm seeing more and more. I've actually seen some of the really good advisors now are using video themselves and have like a little audience dedicated to doing podcasts or interviews or video communication, because video really is the future when it comes to communicating with your clients. It's so easy to do now, and my suggestion to anyone doing this is, go and investigate it, because it doesn't take a lot. I even did one the other week with a financial advisor, and he wanted to interview me on stuff, and I went into his office, and he was just using an iPhone with I think it was a $15 movie kind of application, got the name of it, I looked it up because I think I downloaded it, and he just had this little frame that he sat his mobile phone in. The application is called Pro Movie. It's very cool, and it just sat there, and we did the interview. Sound quality, everything was great. Posted it up online. Very, very cost effective, cheap production, but quality very good. So we're very lucky now with the tech we've got. We should be able to produce really engaging, high quality video at a fraction of the cost it would have been maybe 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I presume you guys don't use your laptop for the video production, Chris. So in terms of, I guess, some of the stuff that you've sort of, like, in getting this process along with the team, I guess, because when you're coming into, you've come into a new team now, a lot of advisors have their existing team. Is there any recommendations around executing on rolling out a process and how to make sure everyone's on board with it? Because people are used to doing things the way they're used to doing it. Is there any suggestions in that space or experiences?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, with any change, you've got to bring people on the journey, and people need to know where you're going. Why are you actually implementing a process? If they can buy into that vision, that success, then you've got every chance it's going to work. And I think so as part of that, I think what you want to do when you're looking at a team of people, typically someone will emerge as a champion, someone that the other team will look towards as a bit of a beacon or a signal that, this person's bought in, I'm ready to take on that journey. Because it can be hard. Sometimes when you're trying to implement change, there's a lot of resistance. So you've got to find those people that you can rely on as champions that are going to actually adopt that change and be part of that cause. And I think it's, again, it's about communication and celebrating the quick wins. Whenever you're implementing something new, there's going to be teething problems and challenges. So what you want to do is handhold through some of that process and celebrate when things work. If you've got a new thing that you're rolling out and it works and everyone's excited, sharing that success to make sure people say, okay, so we've got an example here of where we've rolled out a new process and things are going really well. Let's keep going. So look, it's just some of those basics around change management, I think, that are really key.
In terms of selecting who does what, is there a process you go around, maybe any profiling of people in the team, or is that sort of an assessment process you might go through? Or?
Yeah, look, I think so. I mean, quite often when, managers come into an organisation, they don't necessarily know that across their team, they may have people with hidden skills. I'll give you a really good example. We've got a guy here, Mark, who, when I joined, he was our one of our main trainers. So he's got an accounting background and really understands accounting and the product. So very, very good at it. But recently, I moved him into a new role, which was overseeing all of our business systems. Because what I realised as we got into it, that for an accountant, he's actually really good on systems. And he really understands what we're trying to do, and he's passionate about it. And so I needed someone to oversee all our systems, and we've got a number, probably about 10 or 12 kind of core systems right across the business, from CRM through to Power BI for a dashboard and a whole lot of other stuff. but I didn't want to get someone super techie. I wanted someone who would actually look at it from the point of we're trying to achieve a business. And I found Mark, had that skill set. So he's now in that role and it's going very well. So that's just one example.
Well, that's a good segue, I guess, into the people side of things. Like you've had huge experience in small teams and big teams, and we've just lost you again, Chris. Can you hear me, Chris? Nice question, by the way, Shane. Keep them coming. It's a really good space to unpack the overlap between accountants and bookkeepers and how planners can work with them. Well, I've been doing quite a bit of work around looking at the balance between sort of how an advisor practice fits into an accounting firm, and I think there's just so much upside in this space. It's just about making those connections.
Wish I persist. I've tried different options, but we keep dropping out. My apologies.
That's all right. Yeah. So we're just rolling into the people side of things, and like obviously when you're building, especially around startups, I think like established businesses, even if it's a smaller advice business, established businesses. Startup businesses. It's crucial. Like the people build the business essentially. Like you can have a great idea, but if you don't have the right people helping you execute this dream, it's not going to work. So what are the things you look for that really help drive your role in terms of what you need to deliver and your business objectives? What are the things that you'd suggest people are looking for?
Well, I think it starts with understanding what your purpose is as a business. I mean, I know this is getting back to some very high level stuff, but if you're very clear on the purpose and some of the values you expect people to exhibit in delivering on that purpose, it makes hiring a lot easier because you're looking for people that really share in the same vision and values that you bring to the business. I think that's really important from day one. And I know, look, I got that wrong in the early days at Xero. There was both probably some existing staff, but also people that I remember one particular hire early on that really wasn't a good fit. And I thought, well, that's fine because they're in a support role. They're not going to cause much problem. But, it doesn't matter what role it is within the business. People, whether it's a person at the front desk or in a support role, or whether it's a CEO or someone on the leadership team, you really got to make sure that the people coming in buy into the vision, buy into the purpose of which you exist, and also really live the values, because life's short. You want to have a business that really hums and the people get along and people really enjoy and have fun working there. And I don't think you can afford to bring in people that aren't really going to buy into that, because it does cause problems. It does actually impact culture, and ultimately, we spend so much time at work. You want to make sure you're working in a culture that people buy in and get along and love working there.
So how do you, is there ways that you might go about that? Is it just taking them down to the pub with the existing team and see if everyone gets along?
Well, look, I used to be quite particular about the hiring process, and it might seem odd, but I hired roughly 270 people at Xero. I interviewed probably about 99% of them. And the reason I did that was, I had a very simple, it wasn't a particularly complex set of questions, but I would always be looking at, what people, the particular questions that really fleshed out what made that person tick. And it was a good process for me, because it meant that I had a finger on the pulse of who was coming into the business. But I think it also demonstrated that, a lot of people coming into a business, doesn't matter how small, the CEO doesn't always interview. And I'm not saying that everyone should do this, but I think demonstrating that the CEO actually really cares about who's coming through the door and who's on the payroll and who's actually, coming into your business is a good message to send. So for me, it was just really about making sure that I felt comfortable that people coming in, live the values or, were a good cultural fit. I rarely said no, but there were occasions I did. And one of two things would happen. Either my manager would go, yeah, fair enough, it's a good point. I didn't see that. Or they would challenge me and we'd have a conversation about why I felt wasn't comfortable with the individual. And it drove a conversation about, okay, well, I didn't see that. This is what I saw. And, I'd usually roll over and let them have their way. But it was just a really good conversation to have about, ensuring that we've got, a high bar in terms of what we're trying to build around culture. Beyond that, I think you can do some analysis around, people's behaviour and other thinking styles. And what you want to make sure is that you get a good mix. You don't want to hire people of the same sort of style or cultural background or, work experience. And, the important thing, I think, in any culture is that you're hiring certainly based on a particular set of values, but certainly you want to have a very diverse culture. And I think that's where you get the best outcomes for a business.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, like I've been across practices hiring quite a bit, and one of the challenges is that people will have to look, if you're looking for someone that you're going to enjoy time with, and that's all you're focusing on, and that you want someone that's similar to you, it's often not going to work in a small business, because the reason why you need other people is because it's you need complementary skill sets. So I guess, it's the challenge of making sure that the people are matching the job description, but also sufficiently, I guess, matching the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's about getting the right people with the right experience and skill sets to perform the job, but making sure that they're going to fit in with the culture, because it stands out. If you get the wrong people in, it's going to hurt you in the long run.
Well, this is actually I've got a bit of a question from my side of things in terms of job descriptions, because I guess especially with a startup business and even with advice businesses, you've got this vision of what you think this role will look like and what's going to be covered, but you don't fully know what the capabilities of people are. And often from a business standpoint, if you've got a resource in your business that's capable of doing different things and maybe working a bit outside what that initial scope was, you probably want them to be able to do it. But how do you manage that? Is that something that you pre-position when they're coming on board, or is this just, how do you communicate and manage those expectations if you suddenly see that there's a better or another channel that they can they're better used for the business's sake?
Yeah, look, I think it's a case of clear expectations, KPIs, position description, right up front. I mean, it's quite common with startups that people come in and there's a particular role, and there's nothing wrong with creating a role and then finding that you need to sort of change and alter that as you go forward. I think most startups would have a particular structure and process in mind, and as they go through, they realise that there's skill gaps or they've got a role that's not quite delivering where they want it to. So you've got to be somewhat flexible, but the more you can actually set expectations by having a clear set of deliverables and outcomes and KPIs right up front, I think that's really important. You're on mute. Sorry.
Thanks, Chris. It's my turn to have a couple of tech mishaps. On the KPIs, you've got a range of different people that do different roles in your businesses that you work with, and you've got arguably the front end, which is a sales-focused role. You'd think they're a bit easier to sort of set the KPIs for linking them to the business's objectives. But what about the internal team, and how do you look at rewarding them and incentivising them?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really good question, because quite often you've got a lot of, or you have administration staff that aren't necessarily tied to KPIs or sales outcomes, where there's commissions or other things like that. And I think as much as possible, again, I think it's about making sure that they're bought into the vision that you're trying to create. Because I think ultimately, teams working together and being able to deliver as a team on outcomes, people aren't always driven by money. Money is not always the motivator. It's about making sure that you've got, really good outcomes that people can share in the success. So you've got to make sure that other staff that are in support roles are really bought into that, and that they're excited about delivering a result. You're not necessarily going to have everyone on commission and so forth, but it's about making sure that they're really sharing in the success.
And is that by identifying, more unique or different types of KPIs within people's roles?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's about making sure that you got, as well as KPIs, it's making sure that you're really clear on the interaction between different roles and departments, so that there's clear ownership and handover on those outcomes.
Nice one. I guess we've got a couple of questions that come through. Shane, so we might just jump into Shane Hayes' question around. It's a good one. It's the whole interplay between accountants and advisors, and it's a really, I guess, arguably a frontier that's yet to be cracked when you consider how many accountants are out there and how many advisors have relationships with accountants, and deep relationships where the accountants are working. Well, a lot of the accountants' client base are working with a financial advisor. We've got a situation where licensing has, like, accountants can no longer do things that they did previously without either being self-licensed, limited licensed, or having a partnership with an advisor. What are some of your suggestions around planners approaching this space and making connections with accountants?
So, well, I think, it's interesting because, I think there's been a lot of talk about consolidation in the industry, accountants merging, or, financial planners buying accounting practices, accountants getting AFSLs, and we're going to see more and more of that. So I think the consolidation is happening because ultimately you've got to look at what's really driving a lot of that, and that is that I think that more and more having for a client, having an advisor that one person to go to for all of your finances is becoming much more attractive. I look at my own situation and having one advisor that can do all my accounting, but also a financial planner that can help me with a lot of decision making around my finances. So I think a lot of this has been driven by the market about clients wanting to have, an advisor that can look at their whole of wealth, and of course that's what's really driving this kind of collaboration between the two, and the fact that there's also some other commercial outcomes where you've got advisors that are wanting to get into the accounting space because there's a lot of data that they can get on clients around tax returns and other things where I think financial planners generally are able to monetize that far more effectively than the accountant. So we'll continue to see a lot of those trends emerge.
Yeah, it's definitely, particularly in business valuations, there's such a big discrepancy about how much a client is worth in advice versus accounting. It's quite a large, with accounting firms being worth between 0.5 and 1 times revenue, and advice firms going from 2.5 all the way to 4 times revenue. So it's definitely it's a good move, Shane. I'd keep on looking at it, but it's not necessarily an easy move. That's all. So, Chris, with I guess the priorities that you've got with these businesses that you've been running, how have you managed, especially now? Now's probably one of the best. Like, you can probably think back to when the early days of Xero, but balancing your time between looking at the front end and that business development piece, and then making sure the product's still developing, and the service of existing clients is being delivered. Is there tips around how you, or what are the challenges that happen in that space? Because I think a lot of advisors can relate to that.
Oh, look, I don't necessarily have the perfect answer there, because what happens is that you want to try and get that balance right. But of course, there's times where big opportunities come up and you've got to sort of throw yourself in there. And then there's other times that things at the back end break and you've got to throw yourself in there as well. So, for example, if I look at us right now, we're on a bit of a growth trajectory. Things are happening very rapidly in terms of our growth in the market, and that's exposing some back end things that we want to get to. Equally, we've got partners that are rolling out our product, and they're coming back to saying, "Hey, this could work better," or "We'd love to see this feature," or So we've got to balance innovation on the product with fixing some of the perhaps some of the boring things. I know in the Xero days that in the first year that I was running Xero, we didn't have payroll, we didn't have a whole lot of stuff in there, and we had partners buying into the vision because Xero was quite innovative, and no one was really doing cloud. Yet we had a lot of sort of the boring stuff that we needed to get to make sure we could deliver on, the important stuff. So, I don't have the playbook for getting the balance right, apart from the fact that you do have to juggle a lot of balls, and sometimes you are going to drop some, and other times you're just going to have to really focus on one thing. So that's there's no magic in that. It's just a matter of.
So you're saying it's more of an art than a science, Chris?
I'd definitely say it's an art. I mean, there's tools that can help you with balancing that. I use a product called Trello, which allows me to look at different priorities in the business and then being able to prioritize that. It helps you, make sure that you're not putting all of your attention into one thing. So visually, you can actually see, okay, do I have a good, blend across a lot of the functions of the business? But ultimately, when you're in startup mode, if you don't have all the resources to manage all of that stuff for you, your time is going to be spent sort of jumping around to different things, and that's just the reality of running a business.
Would you say that, because there's been quite a bit of time difference between the last startup that you worked with and now, in terms of the other one grew into a big business, so no longer classified as a startup. Is there quite a big difference in terms of the tools that you've got available to you now? Can you feel the difference does that make it easier having all these tech tools? Or is this all these tech tools that we've got available, is it just like, we think it might be easier because we're using them, or is it just the same stuff? It's just we're doing it a different way.
Oh, look, I think there's, I think it's a lot easier now to run a business than say 5-10 years ago. You've got, so I'm just adjusting a few things here. The challenge you've got, 5-10 years ago was really expensive to do tech. You had to have, your own systems and servers and so forth. And, the reality is now is that you've just got a lot of great tools available that are a fraction of the cost that you can sign up for, under a subscription, try it. If it doesn't work, you can try something else. There's a lot of flexibility now. So it's definitely a lot easier. The challenge then is, because you're not starved for choice, it's a matter of not sort of over-engineering things and having too much stuff that you can't manage. There's a temptation to say, yeah, we need this, we need a new CRM, we need a new reporting tool, we're going to roll out Zoom, we've got Calendly, you've got all these things, plugging them together. And you can sort of drown under the weight of trying to do too much. So I think it's a matter of making sure that you selectively look at the things that you want to automate and then go about it in a fairly structured way. But certainly I've really enjoyed coming into MyProsperity where, we had some systems, but not a lot. And we've spent a lot of time rolling out a new CRM. We've got a great HR system in place now. We didn't really have a lot of visibility on numbers and stuff coming through. It was, we had some spreadsheets that we're pulling out of the back-end system. We've got a really great front-end dashboard reporting tool that the sales guys know on a day-to-day basis where they're at. We've been picking off a number of those things, and things just feel a lot more in control, and I think that's really important. But yeah, I'd much rather run a business these days than I would have, say, maybe 5-10 years ago. It was just way too hard and way too expensive.
Yeah, I getcha. Would you say that, when you're going through these processes to decide, the thought process, what are you thinking about? Because I think this is where, I can say for myself in terms of it's been so hard to get where I've got to in being able to say parking things to the side and not getting excited by certain things, and really, being a bit more patient with waiting for it to actually get there and doing things first before. Is there anything that you can share in terms of how you think about things that makes it easier for you to or make the right calls?
Look, I've always been, I guess I was fortunate from the very first day I started work. I joined a company where customer service was paramount. And that kind of, I had managers that were just completely focused on the customer. And that really instilled in me a discipline around making sure that what we were doing as a business really does need to revolve around the customer. So a lot of the decisions that I make are about ensuring that, we're improving the customer experience, that we're delivering better service to customers. So I just think you've got to be a customer-driven organisation. Even if I go back to the Xero days, I often said to the guys, it would be very easy for us as an organisation to lose sight of the customer and become a bit arrogant. I saw it happen with, I spent 15 years at Microsoft, and Microsoft struggled through some cultural issues where you might recall back in the late 90s, the Department of Justice was going to break up the company. Microsoft was accused of anti-competitive behaviour, and they were saying, that Microsoft's, an arrogant organisation. Well, I saw it firsthand. I saw there was senior managers right up to the very top. And don't get me wrong, Microsoft's a fantastic organisation, but I think anyone who lived through that era would tell you that we were an arrogant organisation to deal with. And I learned a lot from that. And when I went to Xero, I made sure I spoke to the guys all the time that, when we became market leader in Australia, I said that we've still got to really listen and be absolutely attentive to what's going on with our customers, because it'd be very easy for us to be arrogant. But you go back to that Microsoft example, this is very powerful. At the time when Microsoft actually, there was one point I remember in San Francisco in 1999, and the executive turned around and said, look, we've lost sight of the customer. We need to culturally change. And they embarked on this big customer, satisfaction campaign where they're going to turn the culture around, make people more focused on the customer. That was about 1999. You think about some of the absolute behemoths of the industry that emerged during that window when Microsoft was focused on itself. I'm talking Amazon, Google, Apple had a comeback, and then you've got Salesforce.com, the big competitors that really took ownership of different chunks of the market and are just absolute behemoths today, all came to the fore at a time when Microsoft could have dominated those areas of the business. So I think it's a really powerful lesson in, if you're not, even on a small scale, I mean, obviously they're big examples, but even on a small scale, if you're not thinking daily about how you can improve what you're doing with customers, then you're going to be in trouble, or potentially. So that's a big lesson I learned.
Well, that's a great segue into Troyden. I don't know if he's there still, but can MyProsperity link to Xplan? And I know the answer to that already, but he's thrown it out there. So anyone out there that wants to hit Chris between the eyes with a couple of MyProsperity questions?
I'll answer that. In fact, that's a really good question. About being able to deliver to the needs of the market, because we just recently went out on a roadshow back in June and July, and the number one request as we went around, we spoke to about 1,100 accountants and planners. The number one request was, when are you going to integrate to Xplan? So I'm pleased to say we're actually at the AFA event a few weeks ago up on the Gold Coast. We had Xplan come and speak to us, and look, Xplan are obviously a dominant player in the market, and over probably the last 12 months, we know they've done a lot of work on their API, and they haven't been necessarily the easiest to work with on open APIs. And I say that in full respect, but they've got a lot on their plate. But the nice thing that we had learned from Xplan was they've had, in the last recent while, they've had about 189 requests from the market to integrate Xplan into MyProsperity. So the demand's not just coming from our partners, it's coming from partners directly into Xplan. So we're actually looking at the API now. We're optimistic that with some work between now and Christmas, we should be able to have something in market early in the new year. So that's the current plan. So yes, it's in the pipeline. We've got some other really exciting announcements over the next couple of weeks regarding integrations. It's a big focus of ours now to bring in a lot of the the investment platforms directly into the platform. So we've got a team now focused on that. So you're going to start seeing a lot more activity there.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I love a good integration, Chris, and the way you guys are looking at it, it's awesome. And to hear Xplan's actually looking at integrating, that's quite refreshing. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
It doesn't look like there's any other questions, and we are we're getting up there with time. Chris, is there any parting remarks around advisors out there running their businesses that you've seen that maybe you could share just to wrap up?
I always come back to this notion of having fun. I mean, I think, there's days where you kind of, you're buried and things are overwhelming. And I think as much as possible, you've got to try and remind yourself why you sort of started something, whether you're a financial advisor or whether you're, someone like me getting involved in tech. I mean, for me, I just love the challenge of being able to create something that's valuable. And, my sort of ambition, I guess, if you like, which I've got to constantly remind myself of on those days when things do seem overwhelming, is to create something that's really valuable in the market that people really respect and admire, and that they want to use, and it's helping them. And so I think I speak to a lot of financial advisors that might be buried in paperwork and other things, but ultimately they got into advice because they wanted to help people. They wanted to actually improve people's lives and actually see them prosper and thrive. And you hear great stories when when you meet great planners where they talk about, a client that they've had for 30 years that they've really helped. And, I know my advisors helped me out of some difficult challenges going back, in the past. And I think most planners want to be able to have that legacy, that they want to be able to look at their clients and say, look, we just really help them prosper in their lives financially. So I think, again, you've got to come back to your purpose, and you've got to come back to what really motivates you, and keep reminding yourself on that, on those days when it can be, look, running a business can be a really hard slog. So you got to make sure you get your team around you, you enjoy what you're doing, have fun, and stay true to your purpose.
Love it, Chris. Well, I'm certainly been having fun having a chat to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. To the guys out there, we'll see you at the event in Sydney. Chris maybe might even make an appearance if he gets himself a ticket. I know he's a busy man, but especially with it being fintech. And have a great rest of the week. So thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks to your listeners. It's been great being on your show.
Cheers.